The familiar creak of our apartment door pierces through my consciousness as I wake up to betrayal again. But this time, I'm ready for it. The acrid smell of instant coffee, the cheap kind that burns your nostrils, fills the cramped living room where I find my parents hunched over documents. My Steinway baby grand piano, the one I've sacrificed everything for over the past 6 years, gleams mockingly in the corner. Today they're planning to sell it. Again. I tremble with the weight of memories from my previous life, but force my voice to remain steady. Good morning, Mama, Baba. My mother, Lin Xiaoli, doesn't look up from the contract. Her manicured fingers, paid for with money I earned from late-night piano lessons, tap impatiently against the table. Mei Yu, we need to talk. The sound of her voice, syrupy sweet with hidden venom, makes my skin crawl. But this time, I won't panic. This time, I have the ultimate power move. I already know how this story ends. The conservatory called, my father, Chen Weiming, adds without meeting my eyes. The rustle of paper as he slides the sales contract toward me sounds like nails on a chalkboard. They want 50,000 yuan for your final semester. We don't have it. I let the silence stretch, savoring the moment. In my previous life, I begged them not to sell my piano. I cried, I pleaded, I promised to work 3 jobs. I watched them sell my soul for their gambling debts while lying to my face about tuition, but Chen Meiyu died with that betrayal. The woman standing here now was reborn from those ashes. What they don't know is that I've already made my choice, and it's going to destroy everything they think they know about their obedient daughter. The texture of the contract feels different under my fingertips this time. Rougher, more honest than the lies my parents wrapped around it before. I scan the buyer's information. Liu Enterprises, Musical Instrument Acquisition Division. In my previous life, I never bothered to read the fine print. I was too busy drowning in grief. Sell it, I say, my voice cutting through their prepared speeches like a blade through silk. My mother's coffee cup pauses midway to her lips. The sudden silence in our tiny apartment feels heavier than the piano itself. Through the thin walls, I can hear Mrs. Wang's television blaring some melodramatic soap opera, a fitting soundtrack for this moment. I'm sorry, what did you say? My father's voice wavers with confusion. He was prepared for tears, for drama, for the emotional manipulation that worked so perfectly last time. I liberate myself from their expectations with a simple shrug. I said, sell it. The piano has served its purpose. The lie tastes bitter on my tongue, but I've learned that sometimes deception is the only path to truth. My mother's eyes narrow with suspicion. She knows her daughter, or at least she thinks she does. The Meiyu who would rather die than lose her piano. The Meiyu who worked herself to exhaustion teaching spoiled rich kids just to afford the monthly payments. That Meiyu was a fool. You're not upset? My mother's voice cracks slightly. I can smell her desperation. It's sharp and metallic, like the taste of pennies. I stand up slowly, deliberately, letting the moment crystallize. This is my first giving them exactly what they want while knowing something they don't. In 3 weeks, the Shanghai International Piano Competition will announce its finalists. My name will be on that list, not because of the piano sitting in our living room, but because of the one I've been practicing on in secret at the university. Why would I be upset about selling a tool I've outgrown? I ask, watching their faces carefully. I'm not a child anymore. The morning sunlight streaming through our grimy window catches the piano's surface, creating tiny rainbows in the dust motes that dance around it. My father clears his throat, the sound rough with confusion, and is that disappointment? Well, if you're sure. Mr. Liu will be here this afternoon to... I'll be at the university, I interrupt smoothly. I have a lesson with Professor Zhang. Another lie. Professor Zhang hasn't spoken to me since I missed my tuition payment last semester. But in 2 hours, I have an appointment with someone who will change everything. Lin Hao, the youngest concert hall director in Shanghai's history, and the man whose heart I broke in my previous life. What my parents don't realize is that I'm not just losing a piano today, I'm gaining something far more valuable. And Lin Hao is going to help me get my revenge. The university's practice rooms hum with activity as I navigate the familiar hallways, my footsteps echoing against polished marble floors. The smell of rosin and old wood fills my nostrils, a scent that used to comfort me but now makes my chest tighten with complex emotions. I pause outside practice room 12, where I spent countless hours in my previous life, bleeding my soul onto ivory keys. Through the small window, I can see it's occupied by Zhang Wei, a second-year student whose parents bought his way into the program. His playing is technically proficient but emotionally vacant, like watching a robot simulate human feeling. The irony devastates me. In my first life, I believed talent and hard work would be enough. I was so naive. May you? The voice behind me sends electricity down my spine. I turn slowly, already knowing who I'll see, but still my breath catches. Lin Hao stands 3 feet away, looking exactly as I remember. Tall, elegant, with those impossibly deep eyes that seem to see straight through you. He wears a charcoal gray suit that probably costs more than my family's rent. But there's something vulnerable in the way he's looking at me. Professor Lin, I say formally, even though we both know that's not how this conversation will end. He flinches at the title. You know I hate when you call me that. We're the same age. The texture of my memories feels rough against my consciousness. All the fights we had in my previous life. All the ways I pushed him away because I was too proud to accept help. Too broken to believe someone could love the real me. I destroyed us both with my stubborn independence. Not this time. I need to ask you something, I say, stepping closer. Close enough to smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that whispers rather than shouts. And I need you to say yes without asking questions. His eyebrows draw together in concern. Mayu, what's wrong? You look different. Different. If only he knew. I tremble with the weight of keeping my secret, but this conversation requires precision. One wrong word and I could lose everything before I even begin. I want to audition for the Shanghai International Competition, I say quietly, but I need to use the concert hall piano for practice, every day for the next 3 weeks. That's... He pauses, processing. That's against protocol. The competition applications closed months ago, and the concert hall is reserved for... I know what it's reserved for. My voice carries steel now, the same steel that kept me breathing through starvation and humiliation in my first life. I'm not asking for charity, Hao. I'm asking for a chance to show you something impossible. The use of his first name hangs between us like a bridge neither of us is sure we should cross. In my previous life, I called him Lin Hao until the very end, maintaining distance even as my heart shattered. This time, I won't let pride destroy what could be salvation. The distant sound of someone practicing Chopin's Ballade No. 1 drifts from down the hall, the same piece that won me second place in regionals during my first life, the achievement that made me believe I was destined for greatness. He steps closer, and I can see the exact moment he decides to trust me. It's written in the subtle softening of his shoulders, the way his hand almost reaches for mine before stopping. 3 weeks, he says finally, but if anyone asks, they won't, I interrupt. Because after 3 weeks, no one will question why Chen Meiyu had access to anything she wanted. I reach into my bag and pull out a USB drive. This contains recordings of pieces I've been working on in secret. Listen to them tonight. Then decide if you think I'm wasting your time. I press the drive into his palm, letting my fingers linger against his skin for just a moment longer than necessary. The contact sends heat racing up my arm, but I keep my expression neutral. In my previous life, I was too afraid to touch him, too convinced I didn't deserve gentleness. May you. His voice drops to a whisper. What aren't you telling me? Everything, I want to say. I'm not telling you that in another life, you died waiting for me to come back. I'm not telling you that my parents are about to sell the piano you gave me for my 20th birthday. I'm not telling you that 3 weeks from now, I'm going to make history and I need you beside me when I do. Instead, I smile. The first real smile I've given anyone since waking up in this second chance at life. Ask me again in 3 weeks, I say, then walk away before he can see the tears gathering in my eyes. By the time I return home that evening, my parents have already collected their 30 pieces of silver. The living room feels cavernous without my piano, like a body with its heart surgically removed. The indentations in the carpet where the legs stood look like tiny graves. My mother sits at our cheap dining table, counting bills with the focused intensity of an accountant. The rustling paper sounds obscenely loud in the hollow space. My father hovers nearby, his fingers drumming nervously against his thigh, a tell I recognize from years of watching him lose money at mahjong parlors. How much? I ask, dropping my bag by the door. 43,000, my mother replies without looking up. Mr. Liu was very generous. The number hits me like a physical blow, not because it's low, but because it's exactly what they got in my previous life. Some cosmic constants apparently remain unchanged. What does change is my reaction. I don't cry, I don't scream, I don't beg them to tell me where they're really taking the money. Instead, I nod calmly and head toward my room. I'm glad it worked out. Mayu, wait. My father's voice stops me at the hallway entrance. We want you to know this money is for your education. Every yuan will go toward your final semester. The lie tastes like ash in the air between us. I can smell the deception rolling off him in waves. Nervous sweat mixed with the lingering cigarette smoke that clings to his clothes. In my previous life, I believed him. I trusted that my sacrifice meant something to them. I turn back with a smile that doesn't reach my eyes. I know, Baba. You've always put my education first. The words are poisoned honey, sweet enough to swallow but toxic enough to burn. My mother finally looks up from her counting, and for a split second, I see something that might be guilt flicker across her features. We do love you, you know, she says quietly. This is just temporary. Once you graduate and start performing professionally. I let her words hang in the air like incense smoke, thick and meaningless. Professional performing. As if the conservatory would ever give someone like me, someone whose parents sold her piano for gambling money, a real recommendation. As if the established musicians would ever accept a girl from the wrong side of Shanghai into their pristine circles. The smell of the dinner my mother is cooking, cheap noodles with wilted vegetables, fills the apartment. A sharp contrast to the feast my parents will probably buy tonight with their newfound wealth. I understand, I say finally. And I do. I understand that they see me as an investment that hasn't paid off, a resource to be liquidated when convenient. I understand that their love comes with price tags and conditions. What they don't understand is that Chen Meiyu, the investment, is dead. The woman standing before them now has learned to appreciate her own value. In my room, I sit on my narrow bed and pull out my phone. Lin Hao has already sent 3 messages. I listened to your recordings. Meiyu, this is extraordinary. How long have you been working on these pieces? We need to talk. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. at the concert hall. I smile at the screen, feeling something warm and dangerous unfurl in my chest. In my previous life, I never sent him those recordings. I was too proud, too afraid of vulnerability. I let fear rob me of the chance to show him who I really was beneath the struggle and desperation. This time, I'm not afraid of being seen. I type back a single message. Tomorrow, you'll understand everything. Bring the competition application forms. Then I set my phone aside and do something I haven't done since my rebirth. I laugh. It starts as a small chuckle but grows into something wild and free, echoing off the walls of my tiny room. From the kitchen, I hear my parents' conversation pause. Is she laughing? My father asks, confusion clear in his voice. Maybe she's finally growing up, my mother replies, learning to be practical. If only they knew that their practical daughter is about to become the most impractical thing imaginable, famous. And when that happens, their little web of lies is going to unravel in the most public way possible. I pull out my laptop and begin typing an email to Zhang Wei, the mediocre pianist I saw earlier. It's time to make some arrangements for tomorrow's practice session. After all, witnesses are essential for what I have planned. The Shanghai Concert Hall at 7 a.m. is a cathedral of silence, all soaring ceilings and empty seats that seem to hold their breath in anticipation. My footsteps echo against polished marble as I make my way toward the stage, where the Steinway Model D sits like a sleeping giant. Lin Hao waits beside the piano bench, still wearing yesterday's shirt beneath a fresh jacket, a detail that tells me he didn't sleep much after hearing my recordings. His hair is slightly mussed, and there are shadows under his eyes that speak of hours spent listening, rewinding, questioning everything he thought he knew about Chen Meiyu. You came, he says as I approach, his voice carrying across the empty hall. I said I would. I set my bag down carefully, noting how the morning light streaming through the hall's windows creates patterns on the stage floor. In my previous life, I only performed here once, a disaster of nerves and inadequate preparation that ended my classical career before it began. Today feels different. Today, I am different. May you, Linhouse starts, then stops, apparently struggling with where to begin. Those recordings. Some of those pieces haven't been performed publicly in decades. The Rachmaninoff variations you played, I've only heard them once before at a private recital in Vienna. How did you even get the sheet music? I settle onto the piano bench, running my fingers across the keys without pressing them. The ivory feels cool and familiar, like greeting an old friend after a long separation. There are things about me you don't know how, things I've never told anyone. It's not quite a lie. After all, he doesn't know about my rebirth, about the decades of experience I carry in this young body, about the performances I gave and the mistakes I made in a life that no longer exists. Show me, he says simply. The silence in the hall is so complete I can hear the whisper of my sleeves against my arms as I position my hands. The air smells faintly of lemon polish and old wood, the scent of a space where thousands of musicians have poured their souls into sound. I begin with Chopin's Ballad No. 4 in F minor. Not the safe, technical interpretation that won me regional competitions in my first life, but something deeper, more dangerous. I let my fingers remember not just the notes, but the heartbreak that inspired them, the fury that drove Chopin to write music that could shatter glass or heal wounds. Within the first 8 measures, I feel Linhouse's presence shift behind me. His breathing changes, becomes shallower, more focused. I know that feeling. It's what happens when you witness something that rewrites your understanding of the possible. The music flows through me like water through a broken dam, and I realize I'm not just playing for Lin Hao. I'm playing for the Chen Mei Yu who died believing she wasn't good enough, for the parents who sold her dreams for pocket change, for every person who ever looked at a girl from a poor family and decided she couldn't possibly have anything worth hearing. When I finish, the silence stretches so long, I begin to worry I've overplayed my hand. Then Lin Hao moves, walking around the piano until he's facing me, his expression unreadable. That wasn't just technical mastery, he says slowly. That was prophetic, like you were channeling Chopin himself. I stand up from the bench, letting my hands fall to my sides. Now will you help me get into the competition? Instead of answering immediately, he pulls out his phone and begins typing rapidly. I'm sending a message to the competition director. She owes me a favor and she needs to hear this. What kind of favor? I ask, curious despite myself. The kind that happens when you save someone's career, he replies without elaborating. Can you be here tomorrow at the same time? And can you prepare 3 more pieces? Something romantic, something modern, and something unexpected. I reach into my bag and pull out a folder of sheet music I've been carrying since my rebirth. Liszt's Transcendental Etude No. 4, Ligottai's Etude No. 6, and Kapustin's Jazz Etude No. 1. Will those work? His eyes widen as he recognizes the pieces. That's a suicide mission. Those pieces are legendarily difficult. Even professional concert pianists avoid programming them together. I'm not most pianists, I say simply. The truth of that statement hangs between us like a bridge waiting to be crossed. In my previous life, I was afraid to reach too high, afraid to risk failure on the chance I might touch greatness. Fear made me small, made me safe, made me forgettable. This time, I choose to be unforgettable. As we leave the concert hall together, Lin Hao's phone buzzes with a message that makes him stop walking entirely. He reads it twice, then looks at me with something approaching awe. The competition director wants to hear you play. Tomorrow, but may you? He pauses, seeming to choose his words carefully. She doesn't just want to evaluate you for this year's competition. She wants to discuss something bigger. How much bigger? I ask, though I think I already know the answer. Shanghai International has never had a featured artist under 25, he says quietly. You might be about to change that. I return home to find my parents celebrating with expensive baijiu and takeout from the restaurant 3 blocks over. the one we could never afford when I was growing up. The smell of alcohol and rich food fills our small apartment, a stark contrast to the usual aroma of instant noodles and desperation. May you? My mother's voice is too bright, too cheerful, lubricated by liquor and guilt. Come celebrate with us. Your father got a promotion at the factory. Another lie. In my previous life, I believed this story for exactly 48 hours, until Mrs. Wang mentioned seeing my father at the underground gambling den on Huaihai Road, losing everything they'd gotten from my piano, plus whatever he'd borrowed against his next 3 paychecks. That's wonderful news, I say, settling into my usual chair at our tiny table. What's your new position? My father's eyes dart away from mine as he mumbles something about quality control and increased responsibilities. His hands shake slightly as he pours himself another drink, not from celebration, but from the adrenaline crash that comes after a big win. Or, in his case, after liquidating his daughter's dreams to fund his addiction. I watch them perform their charade with detached fascination. It's like observing actors who've forgotten they're in a play, so convinced by their own performances that they believe the fiction has become reality. We've been thinking, my mother continues, reaching across the table to pat my hand with fingers that smell like expensive hand cream. Another new purchase. Maybe you should consider changing majors, something more practical, business maybe, or accounting. The suggestion hits exactly as it did in my previous life, like a slap designed to sting rather than injure. But this time, I don't react with hurt and protests. This time, I have something they don't: the knowledge of what comes next. The sound of firecrackers exploding in the distance, some neighbor's celebration, punctuates the silence as I consider my response. The harsh, sharp cracks mirror the sound my dreams made when they shattered the first time around. You might be right, I say slowly, savoring the confusion that flickers across their faces. Music is such an uncertain career path. Maybe I should focus on something with guaranteed returns. My father nearly chokes on his drink. You agree? Of course, I continue, letting my voice carry just enough resignation to sell the performance. After all, what's the point of pursuing art when there are bills to pay and practical concerns to address? Why chase something as ephemeral as music when you could build something solid and reliable? Each word is carefully chosen, a mirror held up to their own justifications. I watch my mother's face as she recognizes her own arguments reflected back at her, sees how hollow they sound when spoken by someone else. Well, she says uncertainly, it's not that music isn't important, it's just— No, you're absolutely right, I interrupt gently. Music doesn't pay the bills. Music doesn't put food on the table. Music is just a hobby, really. Something for people who can afford to indulge in luxuries. My father sets down his glass with a sharp clink. You don't have to be so dramatic. We're not saying music isn't valuable. Aren't you? I lean back in my chair, letting the question hang in the air like smoke. When you sell someone's instrument, aren't you saying that music is less important than money? When you suggest they change careers, aren't you saying their passion is impractical? The apartment falls silent except for the distant hum of traffic and the muffled sound of our neighbor's television. My parents exchange glances, the kind of wordless communication that happens between people who've spent years perfecting their lies. I reach into my pocket and pull out my phone, setting it on the table between us. I got some interesting news today about opportunities in music. But you're right, I should probably focus on something more practical. I can see the curiosity burning in their eyes, the way they lean forward slightly despite themselves. In my previous life, I never told them about auditions or opportunities until after they'd already passed, too afraid of their skepticism to share my hopes. This time, I'm not afraid. This time, I'm in control. What kind of opportunities? My mother asks, trying to sound casual. Oh, nothing major, I say with studied indifference. Just some people who were interested in my playing, but like you said, it's probably better to be realistic about these things. I stand up from the table, leaving my phone behind like bait in a trap. I should probably start researching business programs. Thank you for helping me see clearly. As I head toward my room, I can feel their eyes boring into my back, can practically hear the wheels turning in their heads as they try to figure out what they're missing. From my bedroom, I listen to their hushed conversation through the thin walls. Do you think we made a mistake? My mother whispers. What kind of opportunities was she talking about? My father replies. Should we ask her? And admit we were wrong about selling the piano? Their voices drop too low for me to make out the words, but I don't need to hear them. I know exactly what's happening. The first tiny cracks are appearing in their wall of certainty. Soon, those cracks will become fissures. And then, everything will come crashing down. The next morning arrives with unusual fanfare. My parents are already awake when my alarm goes off at 6 a.m., hovering in the kitchen like guilty spirits. The smell of actual breakfast food fills the apartment. Eggs, real coffee, even congee with preserved vegetables. Foods we haven't been able to afford in months suddenly appear the day after they sell my piano. You're up early, my mother observes, watching me gather my things. Her voice carries a nervous edge that wasn't there yesterday. I have that lesson with Professor Zhang. I lie smoothly, the same fabrication from yesterday now serving a different purpose. And then some research to do about business programs. My father looks up from his newspaper, another luxury that disappeared from our household years ago. What time will you be home? There's something in his tone I don't recognize from my previous life. Uncertainty. As if he's no longer sure of his place in the parent-child dynamic we've maintained for years. Late, I say simply. I have a lot to figure out. I'm halfway to the door when my mother's voice stops me. May you, about those opportunities you mentioned yesterday. I turn back slowly, letting them see the careful consideration on my face. What about them? Maybe you could tell us more about them? Just out of curiosity. The morning air carries the scent of street vendors preparing breakfast, sweet bean curd, fried dough sticks, the smoky aroma of coal fires that reminds me of childhood mornings when we were poor but happy. There's nothing to tell, I say with perfect nonchalance. I mentioned them to someone who knows about these things, and they said I should pursue something more stable instead. So that's what I'm doing. The lie is exquisite in its precision. They don't know about Lin Hao, don't know about the concert hall, don't know that in 3 hours I'll be playing for the director of the most prestigious piano competition in Asia. All they know is that their obedient daughter suddenly seems to have secrets, and their comfortable narrative of sacrifice and necessity is beginning to feel less solid. We just want what's best for you, my father says, but his voice lacks the conviction it carried yesterday. I know, I reply gently, and that's why I'm taking your advice. I leave them sitting in their expensive breakfast, drowning in the guilt they've been trying to avoid since they made their decision. The best revenge, I'm learning, isn't anger or confrontation. It's giving people exactly what they claim to want and letting them live with the consequences. At the concert hall, I find Lin Hao pacing in the lobby like a caged animal. He's changed clothes since yesterday, but there's still that edge of sleeplessness in his movements, the careful energy of someone operating on caffeine and anticipation. She's here, he says without preamble. Director Chen Meiling, she flew in from Beijing this morning specifically to hear you play. I feel something cold and sharp settle in my stomach. Director Chen. I remember her from my previous life, though we never met. She's the woman who discovered Lang Lang, who launched the careers of a dozen internationally renowned pianists. She's also notorious for her brutal honesty and impossibly high standards. How much did you tell her? I ask. Everything I could without sounding insane, Lin Hao replies. That you're a final-year conservatory student with extraordinary technique and unusual musical maturity. That your interpretation of classical repertoire is unlike anything I've heard from someone your age. And what did you not tell her? He meets my eyes directly. That listening to you play feels like witnessing someone channel the ghosts of every great pianist who ever lived. That your understanding of musical structure seems to come from somewhere deeper than education or talent. That you play like someone who's lived through the emotions these composers were trying to capture. The accuracy of his observation sends tremors through my carefully maintained composure. In my previous life, Lin Hao was perceptive, but this version of him, this version who's heard my recordings, who's watched me play with 24 years of accumulated experience, seems to see straight through time itself. Maybe, I say quietly, some people are just born understanding certain truths. And maybe, he replies, some people carry more history than their years would suggest. We stand in the lobby's morning light, surrounded by posters of past performances and upcoming concerts, suspended in a moment that feels both infinitely fragile and absolutely inevitable. In a few minutes, I'll walk onto that stage and play for someone who has the power to change everything. But first, I need to ask the question that's been burning in my chest since yesterday. How? I begin, then pause, gathering courage. In my recordings, did you recognize the interpretation of Rachmaninoff's Third? His expression grows very still. You played it the way Christian Zimmerman did in his 1999 recording. Note for note, phrase for phrase. That recording was never released commercially. It was from a private session in Poland that most people don't know exists. Most people, I agree. Mayu, how did you... Before he can finish his question, the concert hall doors open and director Chen Mailing emerges. She's smaller than I expected, but carries herself with a kind of presence that makes the air around her seem denser, more significant. Mr. Lin, she says, her voice carrying the precision of someone accustomed to being heard. I trust this is the young woman you've been telling me about? I step forward before Lin Hao can respond. Director Chen, I'm Chen Meiyu. Thank you for taking the time to hear me play. She studies me with eyes that have evaluated thousands of hopeful musicians, searching for whatever quality separates the merely talented from the truly exceptional. We'll see if gratitude is warranted, she says finally. Shall we begin? The stage lights feel different this time, warmer, more welcoming, as if the concert hall itself recognizes that something significant is about to happen. Director Chen takes a seat in the front row, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. Lin Hao positions himself off to the side, close enough to see my hands, but far enough away to avoid interfering with the acoustics. I settle onto the bench and allow myself a moment to breathe, to center myself in this body that carries memories of 1,000 performances. The keys beneath my fingertips seem to pulse with potential energy, waiting for direction. What will you be playing? Director Chen asks. Liszt's Transcendental Etude No. 4 in D minor, I reply. Mazeppa. I hear Lin Hao's sharp intake of breath. This isn't one of the pieces we discussed yesterday. This is something harder, more dangerous. A piece that tells the story of a man tied to a wild horse and dragged across the steppes until he either dies or becomes legendary. It's the perfect metaphor for what I'm about to do. The silence in the hall is so complete I can hear the whisper of my own heartbeat, the soft rustle of Director Chen's clothing as she leans forward slightly in her seat. I begin. The opening measures crash through the hall like thunder, all violent passion and barely contained chaos. My fingers find patterns they've known for lifetimes, navigating the treacherous technical passages with the confidence of someone who's already survived them. But this isn't just technical mastery, this is storytelling. I let the music carry me back to memories that don't belong to this life. Performing this same piece in Vienna, in Moscow, in halls where history was made one note at a time. I channel not just my own understanding, but the accumulated wisdom of every pianist who ever struggled with Liszt's impossible demands. The middle section arrives like an eye of a hurricane, deceptively calm, almost tender, before exploding back into the wild ride toward the climax. I can feel Director Chen's attention like heat against my skin, can sense the exact moment when her professional evaluation transforms into something approaching awe. When I finish, the silence stretches for what feels like minutes. My hands rest on the keys, still vibrating with the echoes of what we've just created together, the piano, the hall, and whatever force drives music from possibility into reality. Director Chen stands slowly, her movement deliberate and measured. When she speaks, her voice carries a quality I've never heard before, uncertainty. Play something else, she says. Something that shows me who you are when you're not trying to prove anything. I don't hesitate. My fingers find the opening notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, Opus 9 No. 2, but not the version most people know. This is the interpretation I developed in my previous life during the loneliest nights, when music was the only thing standing between me and despair. The melody unfolds like a conversation with memory itself, each phrase weighted with the knowledge of loss and redemption. I play it the way someone sings a lullaby to themselves in the dark, intimate and honest and completely unguarded. As I play, I let my eyes drift shut. Not because I need to focus, but because I want Director Chen to see that this music lives inside me, that I don't need to think about where my fingers go because they're simply following the map of my soul. When the last note fades, I open my eyes to find Director Chen standing directly beside the piano, close enough that I can see the slight tremor in her hands. "How long have you been playing?" she asks. 20 years, I answer truthfully. She doesn't need to know that some of those years existed in another lifetime. "Who was your first teacher?" "My grandmother. She taught me on an old upright piano that was missing half its keys." Another truth, though I'm not sure it belongs to this timeline or the last one. Director Chen nods slowly as if my answers confirm something she already suspected. "Mr. Lin tells me you want to audition for the Shanghai International Competition." "I do. The application deadline was 6 months ago." "I know. The competition begins in 2 weeks." "I know." She studies my face, searching for something I'm not sure I want her to find. "What you just played, that wasn't the work of a student. That was the interpretation of someone who's lived with these pieces for decades, who understands not just their technical demands, but their emotional architecture." I remain silent, letting her words hang in the air between us. "I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly," she continues. "Have you performed professionally before? Under another name, perhaps? Or in venues that don't keep official records?" The question is so close to the truth that I almost laugh. Instead, I meet her gaze directly. "No, Director Chen. Chen Meiyu has never performed professionally. It's not a lie. Chen Meiyu, the failed conservatory student. Chen Meiyu, the girl whose parents sold her piano. Chen Meiyu, the dreamer who died believing she wasn't good enough. That woman never had the chance to perform professionally, but the woman sitting at this piano now is someone different entirely." Director Chen walks away from the piano, her heels clicking against the stage floor as she moves to where Lin Hao waits. They speak in hushed tones for several minutes, their conversation punctuated by gestures in my direction and what looks like increasingly animated disagreement. Finally, she returns to stand in front of me. "I'm going to make you an offer," she says. "But first, I need to know something. What happened to your piano?" The question hits me like a physical blow, not because I don't want to answer, but because I suddenly realize that Director Chen already knows. She's done her research, made her calls, pieced together the story of Chen Meiyu's circumstances with the thoroughness of someone who's spent her career identifying exceptional talent in unlikely places. "My parents sold it," I say simply. "Yesterday." "For how much?" 43,000 Wayne. Her expression doesn't change, but I see something flicker in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or confirmation of suspicions already formed. "And why did they sell it?" This is the moment where I could lie, could create a more palatable version of my family's dysfunction. But something about Director Chen's presence demands honesty, as if she's already seen through whatever facade I might construct. "They told me it was for my tuition," I say carefully. "But my father has gambling debts that he thinks I don't know about." The admission feels like stepping off a cliff, but also strangely liberating. In my previous life, I spent years protecting my parents' secrets, making excuses for their choices, sacrificing my own needs to maintain their illusions of respectability. The smell of Director Chen's perfume, something subtle and expensive that speaks of international travel and high-stakes meetings, mingles with the lingering scent of the piano's polish, creating an olfactory reminder of the two worlds colliding in this moment. "Mr. Lin," Director Chen says without turning around, "please step outside for a moment." Lin Hao looks like he wants to protest, but something in her tone brooks no argument. He leaves reluctantly, casting one last concerned glance in my direction before the hall doors close behind him. "Now," Director Chen continues once we're alone, "I want you to tell me something honestly. Yesterday, when your parents sold your piano, how did you react?" I think back to that moment. The careful control I maintained, the way I gave them exactly what they wanted while knowing it would ultimately destroy them. I told them to sell it, I admit. Why? Because I realized that the piano wasn't making me a better musician. It was making me dependent. It was making me weak. She nods slowly, as if this answer satisfies some internal calculation. "And how did you know about the competition?" How did you know to come to Mr. Lin? This question is more dangerous, skirting the edges of truths I can't possibly explain. I choose my words carefully. I've been watching the music world for years, I say. I know who has power, who makes decisions, who can open doors that seem closed. I knew that if I was going to make this work, I needed to approach the right person in the right way. And you thought Mr. Lin was the right person? I thought Mr. Lin was someone who would recognize talent even when it came from an unexpected source. Director Chen walks to the edge of the stage, her back to me as she gazes out at the empty seats. In my 30 years in this business, I've heard thousands of auditions. I've discovered genuinely exceptional musicians, people who've gone on to international acclaim, but what you just played, it's different. She turns back to face me. It's not just exceptional technique or musical understanding. It's as if you have access to some deeper well of experience than should be possible for someone your age. The observation sends chills down my spine, but I force my expression to remain neutral. Sometimes, I say quietly, music chooses certain people to be its vessels. Maybe I'm just one of those people. Maybe, she agrees. Or maybe you've lived more than one life. The words hang in the air like a challenge, and for a moment, I wonder if she somehow knows, if my secret is written across my face in ways I can't control. But then she smiles, the first genuine smile I've seen from her, and I realize she's speaking metaphorically about the way music can make us feel connected to experiences beyond our own limited existence. I stand up from the piano bench and walk to where she's standing, meeting her at the edge of the stage. Director Chen, whatever you're thinking of offering me, I want you to know that I'm not here asking for charity or special consideration. I'm here because I believe I can win. Her smile widens. Good, because what I'm about to propose isn't charity. It's the most audacious gamble of my career. She pulls out her phone and begins typing rapidly. I'm going to enter you in the Shanghai International Competition. Not as a last-minute addition, not as a favor to Mr. Lin, but as my personal recommendation. That means if you fail, my reputation fails with you. And if I succeed? If you succeed, you'll become the youngest featured artist in the competition's history. You'll perform with the Shanghai Symphony Orchestra in front of an audience that includes representatives from every major concert hall in the world. The magnitude of what she's offering makes my head spin. This is beyond anything I achieved in my previous life, beyond anything I dared to dream when I woke up in this second chance. There's one condition, she continues. You have to tell me the truth about your piano. I feel my carefully constructed facade beginning to crack. What do you mean? I mean, I want to know why a girl whose parents just sold her instrument for gambling money can play like someone who's spent decades in the world's greatest concert halls. I want to know how you learned interpretations that aren't taught in any conservatory. And I want to know why listening to you play feels like watching someone channel the memories of musicians who died before you were born. The questions press against my chest like physical weight. In a few moments, I'll have to decide how much truth this woman can handle, and how much she needs to know to make her gamble worthwhile. I stand at the edge of the stage, looking out at the empty seats that will soon hold the most important audience of my life, and make a decision that terrifies me. I'm going to tell Director Chen as much of the truth as I can without mentioning my rebirth. When I was 17, I begin, my voice carrying clearly in the acoustic perfection of the hall. I had what I can only describe as a spiritual experience. Director Chen's expression remains neutral, but I can see her attention sharpen. I was practicing late one night in a conservatory practice room, working on Rachmaninoff's Second Concerto. I was struggling with a particular passage, the one where the orchestra drops out and leaves the piano alone with this impossible melody that seems to float between heartbreak and hope. The memory feels real as I speak it, even though it's a careful blend of truth and fiction. Suddenly, it was as if I could hear not just the notes on the page, but the conversation Rachmaninoff was having with his own despair. I could feel the weight of his depression, the way music was his only lifeline to something beyond suffering. The stage lights create tiny rainbows in the dust motes that dance around us, and I focus on them as I choose my next words carefully. From that night forward, music became different for me. It wasn't just about technique or interpretation anymore. It was about channeling something larger than myself, about becoming a conduit for the emotions and experiences that inspired these compositions. Director Chen nods slowly. And you believe this experience gave you access to deeper understanding of musical interpretation? I believe, I say carefully, that some people are born with the ability to remember things they've never learned. Maybe it's genetic memory, maybe it's spiritual inheritance, maybe it's just coincidence. But I can sit down at a piano and play pieces I've never seen before, can interpret works in ways that feel like remembering rather than discovering. It's not exactly a lie. The mechanism I'm describing, mysterious knowledge that seems to come from beyond normal experience, is essentially accurate, even if the specific cause is something I can't possibly explain. And your parents, do they know about this gift? I laugh, and the sound carries a bitterness I don't try to hide. My parents see music as a commodity. They measure its value in potential income and social status. The idea that it might be something sacred, something worth pursuing for its own sake, is completely foreign to them. Is that why you weren't upset when they sold your piano? I wasn't upset because I realized that my relationship with music doesn't depend on owning a particular instrument. The piano was just a tool. What matters is what I can create when I have access to the right tools. Director Chen walks closer, close enough that I can see the fine lines around her eyes, the subtle signs of someone who spent decades making decisions that could launch or destroy careers. Chen Mei Yu, she says quietly, what I'm about to offer you is unprecedented. I want to enter you in the competition not just as a participant, but as a featured emerging artist. That means you'll perform a full concerto with the Shanghai Symphony Orchestra, broadcast live to millions of viewers across Asia. The magnitude of the opportunity makes my knees weak. And if you fail, you'll be forgotten within a week. But if you succeed, she pauses, seeming to weigh her words. If you succeed, you'll become the most famous classical musician in China overnight. Recording contracts, international tours, everything you've ever dreamed of. I take a step closer to her, close enough that she can see the absolute certainty in my eyes. Director Chen, I need you to understand something. This isn't a dream for me, this is destiny. I've been preparing for this moment my entire life, even when I didn't know it. Even when your parents sold your piano for gambling money? Especially then. Because that's when I learned that true musicians don't need external validation or perfect circumstances. They just need the courage to trust their gift. She studies my face for a long moment, and I can practically see her making calculations, weighing the risk to her reputation against the potential reward of discovering someone extraordinary. There's one more thing, she says finally. If I do this, if I stake my career on your talent, I need to know that you're prepared for what comes after. Fame in classical music isn't like pop stardom. It's more intense, more scrutinized, and much less forgiving. Every performance will be compared to this first one. Every mistake will be magnified. Are you prepared for that pressure? I think about my previous life, about all the opportunities I missed because I was too afraid of exactly this kind of scrutiny. About the ways fear made me small and safe and ultimately insignificant. Director Chen, I say with complete honesty, I've been preparing for this pressure my entire life. The only thing I'm afraid of is not being given the chance to prove what I can do. She nods once, decisively, and pulls out her phone again. I'm making the call now. In 15 minutes, you'll officially be entered in the Shanghai International Piano Competition as my personal recommendation. But first, I need to ask you one final question. What is it? When you win, and I believe you will win, what are you going to do about your parents? The question stops me cold. Because for all my planning, all my careful manipulation and strategic thinking, I haven't allowed myself to fully consider what my success will do to the people who betrayed me. I don't know, I admit. Well, she says, beginning to dial. You have 2 weeks to figure it out. Because once this starts, there's no going back. Your life and theirs is about to change forever. I return home that afternoon to find my parents exactly where I left them emotionally, drowning in guilt but too proud to admit their mistake. The expensive takeout containers from this morning have been replaced by cheap instant noodles, as if they're already beginning to realize that their windfall won't last as long as they hoped. My mother looks up from her phone as I enter, and I notice she's been scrolling through music competition websites. The screen shows the Shanghai International Piano Competition homepage, and her expression carries the particular anxiety of someone who's beginning to suspect they may have made a catastrophic error in judgment. "How was your research?" she asks, her voice carefully casual. "Enlightening," I reply, settling into my usual chair. "I learned a lot about the difference between practical choices and practical consequences." My father emerges from the kitchen carrying a cup of the cheap tea we drank before they sold my piano. His hands shake slightly, not from nerves this time, but from the early stages of withdrawal. Whatever gambling high he experienced yesterday is beginning to fade, replaced by the familiar itch for another bet, another chance to recoup his losses. "May you," he begins hesitantly. "We've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about those opportunities you mentioned." I let the silence stretch, forcing them to fill it with their own growing desperation. "Maybe we were too hasty in our advice," my mother continues. "About changing majors, I mean. If there really are opportunities in music." The smell of their anxiety is sharp and metallic, like the taste of copper pennies, mixing with the lingering aroma of yesterday's celebration feast to create something nauseating. "I appreciate that," I say with perfect politeness, "but you were right the first time. Music is impractical. I've already started looking into business programs." The lie lands like a stone in still water, creating ripples of panic that spread across their faces. I watch my mother's throat work as she swallows whatever protest she wants to make, and my father's fingers drum against his thigh in the nervous pattern I recognize from a lifetime of watching him lose money. "But if the opportunities were significant enough," my father tries again. "How significant?" I ask innocently. They exchange glances, the kind of wordless communication between co-conspirators who realize their plan is falling apart. "Well," my mother says carefully, "we were thinking that maybe we acted too quickly yesterday. Maybe we should have discussed your prospects before making any major decisions." I lean back in my chair, letting them see the careful consideration on my face. "You mean before selling my piano?" The words hit them like physical blows. My father actually flinches, and my mother's hand flies to her throat in an unconscious gesture of protection. We could try to get it back," my father offers weakly, "if the opportunities were really significant." "From Mr. Liu?" I ask with feigned surprise. "But wouldn't that be awkward, admitting that you made a mistake?" "It wouldn't be admitting a mistake," my mother says quickly. It would just be adjusting our plans based on new information." I stand up slowly, moving to the window where my piano used to catch the afternoon sunlight. The empty space feels like a missing tooth, obvious and impossible to ignore. "What kind of new information would justify that?" I ask. They're trapped now, forced to either admit they don't actually know what opportunities I'm referring to, or confess that they're beginning to suspect they may have destroyed something irreplaceable. "Maybe you could tell us more about these opportunities," my mother suggests, her voice thin with barely controlled desperation. I turn from the window with a smile that doesn't reach my eyes. "I don't think that's necessary anymore. You've already helped me see that music is just a hobby, something impractical people pursue when they can't handle real responsibilities. Mayu, please." "Besides," I continue, pulling out my phone, "I already called the business school at Shanghai University. They're very interested in my application." It's not entirely a lie. I did call them, though only to confirm that their application deadline isn't until next month. But my parents don't need to know the specifics. I scroll through my messages, letting them see that my phone is full of unread notifications. I should probably respond to these emails about interviews and placement tests. "What emails?" my father asks, his voice cracking slightly. "Oh, just administrative things. Nothing you'd find interesting." The truth is that half the messages are from Lin Hao, updating me on Director Chen's progress in securing my competition placement. The other half are from Director Chen herself, outlining the schedule for the next 2 weeks and the pieces I'll need to perfect for my performance. But my parents don't know that. All they know is that their daughter, who was supposed to be grateful for their practical wisdom, is suddenly receiving mysterious communications and making decisions without consulting them. Maybe we should discuss this as a family, my mother tries desperately. Of course, I agree cheerfully, just like we discussed selling my piano as a family. The comparison hangs in the air like poison gas, making both of them wince. I can see the exact moment they realize that their careful justifications have been turned back on them, that their own logic has become a weapon pointed at their hearts. My phone buzzes with a new message, and I glance at it with studied casualness. It's from Director Chen. Official confirmation received. You're in. Press conference tomorrow at 2 p.m. to announce featured artists. Prepare for everything to change. I look up from my phone to find both my parents staring at me with naked desperation. Who was that? My mother asks. Just someone from the business school. I lie smoothly. They want to schedule an interview for next week. But even as I speak, I can see them beginning to crack. The careful wall of justification they've built around their decision is developing fissures, and soon the whole structure will come crashing down. The only question is whether I'll be standing close enough to get hurt when it falls. The next day's press conference takes place in the same concert hall where I auditioned, but now it's filled with reporters, cameras, and the electric energy of major announcements. I stand backstage with the other featured artists, all of them accomplished musicians in their 20s and 30s, all of them trying not to stare at the girl who's about to become the youngest featured performer in the competition's history. Lin Hao finds me in the green room, his expression mixing pride with concern. Are you ready for this? I've been ready for this my entire life, I reply, and for the first time since my rebirth, I mean it literally. Through the backstage monitors, I can see Director Chen taking the podium. Her voice carries clearly through the sound system as she begins introducing this year's featured artists. Each name she calls receives polite applause, flashes of camera bulbs, the standard response to predictable excellence. Then she pauses, and I know my moment has arrived. Our final featured artist represents something unprecedented in classical music, she begins. Chen Meiyu is 24 years old, a final-year student at the Shanghai Conservatory, and yesterday, she gave me one of the most extraordinary auditions I've experienced in 30 years of discovering talent. The sound of my heartbeat pounds in my ears like timpani drums, mixing with the rustle of fabric as the other artists shift nervously around me. Miss Chen will be performing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3 with the Shanghai Symphony Orchestra, and I believe her interpretation will redefine how we understand both this masterpiece and the possibilities of musical expression itself. The applause that follows is different, surprised, intrigued, building in intensity as the audience realizes they're witnessing history being made. I walk onto the stage with my head high, my spine straight, carrying myself like someone who belongs in this spotlight. The cameras flash like lightning, but I don't blink. I've been preparing for this moment across 2 lifetimes. Miss Chen, the first reporter calls out, you're virtually unknown in classical music circles. How does it feel to be chosen for such a prestigious platform? It feels like coming home, I answer simply. Music doesn't care about your reputation or your connections. It only cares about your ability to serve it faithfully. But you're still a student, another reporter presses. Don't you think this opportunity should go to someone with more professional experience? I smile, and I know everyone in the room can see the quiet confidence radiating from me. Professional experience is measured in performances, not years. I've been performing music in my heart since before I knew what performance meant. I step closer to the microphone cluster, making sure every word carries clearly. I want to say something to everyone who's ever been told their dreams are impractical. Everyone who's been advised to choose safety over possibility. Music chose me, not the other way around. And when something that powerful chooses you, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks about your qualifications. The room has gone completely silent. I can feel the weight of attention, the way hundreds of people are hanging on my words. 2 days ago, my parents sold my piano to pay gambling debts while telling me it was for my education. They suggested I change majors, pursue something more stable. They meant well, but they didn't understand that you can't sell someone's soul and expect them to be grateful for the practical wisdom. Gasps ripple through the audience. This isn't the kind of polite, sanitized backstory usually shared at press conferences. So I want to thank them, I continue, because selling that piano forced me to realize that my relationship with music doesn't depend on owning the right instrument or having perfect circumstances. It depends on having the courage to trust that when you're truly meant for something, the universe will conspire to make it happen. A reporter in the front row raises her hand. Are you saying your parents don't support your musical career? I'm saying my parents are about to learn something about the difference between practical choices and practical consequences. The room explodes with questions, camera flashes, the chaotic energy of a story that's suddenly become much bigger than anyone expected. Through the crowd, I can see Director Chen watching me with something approaching awe and Lin Hao's face shining with pride. But I'm not done yet. I have one more thing to say, I announce, and somehow my voice cuts through the noise, commanding absolute silence. When I perform Rachmaninoff's Third in 2 weeks, I want everyone who's ever been told that they're not good enough, everyone who's ever had their dreams sold out from under them, to understand that this performance is for you. We don't need other people's permission to be extraordinary. As I leave the stage, I can hear the chaos erupting behind me. Reporters shouting questions, cameras clicking frantically, the sound of a story that's about to dominate headlines across the country. I pull out my phone and type a simple message to my parents. Turn on the news. 3 hours later, I'm sitting in Lin Hao's apartment, watching coverage of the press conference on every major news channel, when my phone rings. It's my mother, and she's crying. May you, she sobs, we had no idea. We thought music was just a hobby for you. I know, I say gently. But now you understand that some hobbies are worth more than the money you can get for them. Can you forgive us? I look out Lin Hao's window at the Shanghai skyline, at the city where I died unknown in one life and will become famous in another, and realize that forgiveness isn't the right word for what I'm feeling. Mama, I say finally, in 2 weeks, my signature will be engraved on the stage of the Shanghai Concert Hall. When that happens, I want you and Baba in the audience, watching your daughter do something impossible. Because the best revenge isn't anger or punishment. It's showing people who underestimated you exactly how wrong they were, and then choosing to love them anyway. The piano they sold is gone forever, but Chen Meiyu, the girl who was reborn from betrayal and loss, is just getting started.